humanist perspective presented by the New Orleans Secular Humanist Association, following our few principles of humanism.
We're committed to the use of science and reason for understanding the universe and for solving human problems. We're skeptical of untested claims of knowledge, but we're open to new ideas.
We are concerned with securing justice and fairness in society and in ending intolerance and discrimination. We are committed to the total separation of religion and government.
We affirm humanism as a realistic alternative to the theologies of despair and the ideologies of violence. We reject the concept of an afterlife and believe in living a full and rewarding life here and now.
We value and respect each individual's right to judge and lead their lives according to their own position, as long as it's respectful of other people, living in a free society.
We hope you enjoy today's program and others in the weeks to follow. Hello, folks. It's Harry Greenberger again, host for this show. My guest today is Dr. Sally Kenney, and I know that you have a very busy schedule, and I appreciate your being here very much. I first became aware of Dr. Kenney when I received an announcement which read, Louisiana Courts Matter, a coalition of local organizations and an offshoot of a national coalition, is presenting a panel discussion entitled, Why Courts Matter, Creating a Diverse and Representative Judiciary. I decided that would be something interesting to look into, and when I contacted Dr. Kenney, she graciously agreed to be on the show. But let me tell you a little bit about who Dr. Kenney is, and then we'll start talking about this topic. A native of Iowa, Sally Kenney earned her BA in political science from the University of Iowa, a BA and MA in politics, philosophy, and economics from Magdalen College, Oxford, and an MA and PhD in politics from Princeton University. From 1989 to 1995, she held a joint appointment in political science, women's studies, and law at the University of Iowa. She served on the faculty at the University of Minnesota from at the university's Hubert H. Humphrey Institute of Public Affairs from 1995 to 2009, where she also directed the Center on Women and Public Policy. She joined Tulane University in 2010 as the first Newcomb College Endowed Chair, the executive director of the Newcomb College Institute, and a professor of political science. Now, I am occasionally will comment to people that in Louisiana, politics is a form of entertainment. There are also others who consider politics possibly in a less desirable light. Anyway, I would would also indicate that she teaches Women Leading Change, the third-year course for Newcomb scholars, as well as service learning courses on the politics of rape and domestic violence. Well, getting back to the basic topic, tell us about women and justice or lack of justice, and whatever that panel discussed, or whatever you would like to tell us.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for your interest in courts. Because whether you're interested in politics, or you're interested in justice, or you're interested in morality, courts shape all of the decisions of our lives. And it's really hard to think of a women in public policy issue that's not impacted by judicial decisions, whether it's reproductive rights, equal pay, dissolution of marriage and divorce, child custody, So having courts that are sensitive to women's concerns and fair is really important to everyone. And oftentimes people don't realize how important it is until something happens in their lives and they happen to appear in court, and they learn very fast how important judges are.
When you just interrupt a moment, when you mentioned divorce, I thought it was generally understood that the wife gets everything.
Many men believe that. But in fact, what's the case is that many women are impoverished following the dissolution of marriage, and also many children are. And one of the most important child poverty remediation programs we could do is actually have men pay the child support that courts have awarded them to pay for their own children, and that would do a great deal towards lifting many children out of poverty.
Okay, well, I'm sorry I interrupted you on divorce, but carry on.
Well, so one of the things that troubled me is that most people who are concerned about women in politics don't pay a lot of attention to courts. They say we need to get more women in the legislature, we need to get a woman elected president, and then they say let's just leave the courts and the judiciary to the small group of people who care about them. And so I think people who care about women in politics should also care about the composition of the judiciary. And I also was very concerned that I felt that we were going backwards, that what happens is the press reports when we have a first woman, for example, Chief Justice, or in this case, a second woman Chief Justice of the state Supreme Court, but they don't report the cases that we've identified on the, say, the state Supreme Courts where 65 women have been replaced by men. And so we have the first woman on the South Dakota Supreme Court in 2002, which was the last state to appoint its first woman. But we get less attention to states that revert to being all male, for example, Iowa, Idaho, and Indiana. So we're not, because we're thinking progress is natural, inevitable, and that we're slowly moving forward, we're not paying attention to all the ways we're going backwards by not closely monitoring the composition.
Are you suggesting that male judges are prejudiced and do not treat women's cases fairly?
No, I don't say that. And in fact, the book that I've just written, Gender and Justice, is somewhat
Yes, I wanted to talk about your book. Go ahead.
It's somewhat controversial because I don't take the position that women necessarily make better decisions than men, that they're better judges, that they're more moral, that they treat women necessarily better. I argue for what I call a non-essentialist case for women on the bench, that is, not arguing from women's difference from men, but arguing for women's inclusion. So I think it's very problematic to have a judiciary that doesn't include women. I think it sends a really powerful message. I think that such bodies are illegitimate. And if we think about whether it's juries or judges, most people recognize, for example, if the judiciary were composed only of white people, that would be unfair. And in our states, in our federal system, we have circuit courts of appeal. In our case, we're in the Fifth Circuit, made up of Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas. And if it were the case that all of those judges were drawn from Texas, the residents of Louisiana and Mississippi would say, no fair, you've left us out. Mm-hmm. And you can't decide cases that affect us if you don't include people from our jurisdiction on that court. But somehow it doesn't seem to carry over in many people's thinking about why it's not legitimate to exclude women from judicial office.
Tell me if I'm correct, but some judges are elected and some judges are appointed.
Right.
Now, how does that affect whether we're getting male or female judges?
Good question. So at the federal system, the president appoints and the Senate confirms, and they serve for life and good behavior. But each state has its own system. So in the state of Louisiana, we elect judges by partisan election. And any system can include women in fair levels of representation, and any system of selection can exclude them. And so we have examples of both. Examples of where women have been very well served by partisan election, Actually, that's relatively the case in Louisiana. So around almost 25% of our state judges are women. We have women on a Chief Justice, and women. So we're actually doing better in our judicial branch than we're doing, for example, in our legislative branch.
It's absolutely surprising because Louisiana is generally behind times on everything. But you're saying that the conditions here are beat many or what, most of the other states?
We're right in the middle of the pack, and we're not used to being in the middle of the pack. We're used to being the bottom of the pack.
You're right about that.
So I think that's a very interesting argument, because a number of political scientists have said women can't win in the South, or it's more difficult for women to win in the South, but they can only really make that claim if they don't look at judicial office. And I feel that we should look at judicial office and understand, maybe if we want to know how to get higher levels of women's legislative representation in the South, we might want to look at the cases of women who've been very effective in running for judicial office in the South, and then question this idea of whether our political culture is inherently inhospitable to women in elective office.
Let me ask you this, because at least in recent times in politics, the big separation has been the ultra-conservatives from the progressives. Mm-hmm. How does that affect the election or the nomination of women? Generally, women are generally more liberal than men seeking the same positions?
Well, it varies over time, but another way that I've parted company with some of my progressive friends is I believe discrimination is wrong, even if it's discrimination against conservative women. So, for example, when President Bush appointed judge after judge after judge to the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeal, all of whom were very conservative judges, I wondered, was there not a single woman who was good enough as a conservative to be on the bench? So I don't believe...
You're saying that the Senate rejected those nominations?
In some cases. So women find it, in times of divided government, women and minority men are less likely to be confirmed in the process, and that's why there's been such controversy over the filibuster and the process of approving judges. But in this case, it was a choice of the president. The president actually didn't nominate conservative women for those positions. And when he did try to nominate a woman for the Supreme Court, he had to withdraw that nomination. So I think women should serve across the spectrum. I don't think it's fair to exclude or discriminate against women. If you're choosing a conservative judge, why not choose a woman conservative judge? Why is it okay to only pick men from that group and exclude women? I think that's wrong. Okay, well now,
to make progress in this respect about women being treated equally with men, what do you and the people you work with, how do you attempt to accomplish this?
So what we're trying to do is to educate people about why the composition of the court matters to them and why we shouldn't leave it in the hands of a few legal experts. So this is a nationwide movement of which I'm a part, to try to draw attention to the fact, for example, that that we face really a state of judicial emergency, so declared by our own conference on the judiciary. And what is happening is conservative senators are basically trying to run out the clock on President Obama. They did it during his first term and during his second term, and they believe if they don't nominate judges and if they don't act on the president's nominations, then hopefully the president will eventually leave office and they can fill all of those positions with someone from their ideological view.
Is it creating a problem for justice having unfilled judicial positions?
Yes, I mean, so we are familiar with the phrase justice delayed is justice denied.
Okay.
So the federal docket is in a state of emergency. For example, in Texas, where both Republican senators have been particularly recalcitrant about putting forth names of qualified judicial nominees so that they can just leave those positions vacant. And the Senate only confirmed, for example, the 3 nominees President Obama made to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals after the Senate changed its rules of procedure. So none of those 3 judges would have gotten 60 votes, but everyone said they were well-qualified jurists. Even the conservative judges said, we're not saying they're not qualified to be judges, but they were refusing to act on those nominations. So I feel it's really a crisis in how we go about filling those positions. And I'd like to say my home state of Iowa, I think, has been an example because Senator Grassley and Senator Harkin, who could not be more different in their political views, are the only state that I know of where they've taken a position that they are not going to sabotage each other's judicial nominees. Mm-hmm. And so we had the strange situation of Senator Grassley, who supported Senator Harkin's nominee of Jane Kelly to the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals at the same time that he was blocking all of President Obama's other judicial appointments, for example, to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. So this historical reciprocity between senators has completely broken down. Yes. And it's not a question about who's qualified. It's not a question about who has judicial temperament. It's merely a question of spoils. And I think that's bad for our courts, and I think that's bad for our politics.
When you use the word crisis, which you have done twice, how do you affect a crisis?
So I think one of the good things about this issue is that a very small number of people can make a difference. So, for example, Senator Vitter, who had argued when President Bush was in power that every judicial nominee deserved an up or down vote. He refused to return what's called the blue slip, which is his approval on the candidate for Louisiana, Sally Dick, when President Obama nominated her during his first term of office. And then President Obama was reelected and renominated her to that position, and she was finally confirmed.
With or without Vitter?
He did return the blue slip on him, but he was hoping, really to run out the clock, and he does that with no scrutiny. It's profoundly anti-democratic to let one senator in a home state deny the president his constitutional power to nominate members of the judiciary and to leave positions in the judiciary vacant. And that's our system right now.
Are you saying that the solution to this crisis is to elect a different set of senators?
Well, I think my understanding of Senator Vitter is that he is amenable to the good government argument. That let's just think this through. Do we really want to continue this system of gridlock, or do we want to come together and say, let's find a compromise so that we can fill judicial appointments?
The question is, when you said do we, who is we?
I think the American people should demand that all of our branches of government are functioning, and that one senator or a handful of senators cannot keep the Senate from moving forward on the president's judicial nominees.
Well, I would support the public demanding something, but then that's not the same as getting results.
Right, but I think if Senator Vitter and the senators from Texas and the other people heard from their constituents who care about the functioning of the federal courts and said, find someone we can all agree on and let's fill these vacancies, they would respond. But right now, most people have no idea that there's a state of judicial emergency, that the positions are unfilled, that 1 or 2 senators can block everything in the U.S. Senate. And that's what we're trying to do, is shine a light on that state of affairs.
I don't know if this is related to just what we're talking about, but it says that you are the executive director of Newcomb College Institute. What is that?
The Newcomb College Institute is the department, institute Tulane University created after Katrina, when Newcomb College stopped being a degree-granting institution, and instead students all got their degrees from Newcomb Tulane College of Tulane University. Mm-hmm. So the university put together the programs and the funds functioning as endowment and created this institute, and I'm their first permanent director.
And then how do you use that position to further your objective about equality in government?
So our mission is to educate undergraduate women for leadership, to honor the legacy of H. Sophia Newcomb Memorial College, to produce and disseminate knowledge about women, and to empower women by bringing together the teaching, research, and service functions of Tulane University. So we have many programs for undergraduate women students, ranging from, as you mentioned, our Newcomb Scholars Program, which is a very elite program for 20 students per year who take a series of courses, one of which I teach. And then we have a variety of student groups, ranging from an athletic women's student group to a women in politics group to women in science. And we fund students to do internships so that they can do research or learn about things that will enhance their employability, and put on many programs.
All right. Well, are you these students who go through those courses out at Newcomb? Are you encouraging them to be politically active and to actually become become a part of the movement, or you leave that to their discretion?
Well, we support students' civic engagement across the board. So I think it's very well known that after Katrina, Tulane University really reinvented itself as a university that's committed to public service. And so the Newcomb College Institute is able to add the women, gender, and feminism part of that commitment to public service across a broad political spectrum. So we feel that students need to use their passions towards helping solve public policy problems. And so we're trying to facilitate that sort of ethos, an ethos of service to the community and political engagement across a broad spectrum of issues.
Do you do any actual lobbying?
The Institute itself doesn't lobby, and so I'd want to really separate what I do in my role as the executive director. But faculty across the board at Tulane University are encouraged to speak out to help solve problems, whether those are the problems of losing our coastline, whether they're the problems of our schools, whether they're the problems of our criminal justice system, whether it's climate change. That's one of the main reasons I took this position, because I really wanted to use my academic knowledge to be engaged in the world and to encourage my students to do that. We don't do that on a narrow sense of lobbying for particular issues, but we do speak out broadly on issues of women's equality, and the composition of the courts is one such issue.
Okay, now it says here your latest book is Gender and Justice, Why Women in the Judiciary Really Matter. Now, you have written an entire book on that topic. Give us the gist of that.
So what I try to do is to have a book which is not an academic book for political scientists, but is a book for the general readers. And my only evidence of success so far is my mom has given it 5 stars on Goodreads. So she says it's accessible to the general audience, and she's one of my tests. And what I do is I make the argument about why we need more women on courts. And then I take 6 different jurisdictions. So, for example, the state of Minnesota, the state of California, the federal judicial system under the Carter administration, the United Kingdom, and the European Court of Justice.
Okay.
And I talk about different kinds of issues in each of those places and talk about why we need to understand why gender matters in thinking about each of those jurisdictions. So I tell a different story about women judges to help us understand concepts about gender and why it matters that we have women serving on the courts.
In relationship to other advanced countries, how does this country stand in relation to women in the judiciary?
That's a good question. So it's interesting because for a long time I worked on the European Court of Justice, which is the court of the European Union, and the advanced Western countries would always say, well, when the new countries join, for example, the Scandinavian countries, then we'll get more women on the court, as if there were no women in France or Germany or the United Kingdom. And actually, it's been the Eastern European countries that have been the most forward-thinking about nominating women judges to the court of the European Court of Justice. So,
when you say Eastern European, give us, for example, what countries are those?
Croatia, Poland,
Okay.
the new members of the European Union.
The former part of the USSR?
Correct.
But Russia does not qualify.
Russia is not part of the European Union.
Okay.
It doesn't look like they're in a big hurry to join right now.
It does not appear that way.
But that's interesting because I've been invited to work with the women judges in the country of Georgia, and they're very aggressive about trying to raise this issue. So. They look to the United States and the U.S. Supreme Court as an example. We're at around about 25% or to 30%. I'd like to see us move to 50%. I think that's where we belong. And in countries that we call civil law countries like France, the lower judiciary is made up overwhelmingly of women, but the higher judiciary and the judiciary for the constitutional courts, for example, does not include women in large numbers. So no matter how well a country's doing, there's still a lot of room for improvement for everybody.
Of course. Well, we've got about a minute or so left. Why don't you tell our audience what you would like them to do or take away from this discussion?
I would like them to investigate what is going on and join our Coalition Courts Matter. We have a website. You can be involved in the state of Louisiana, in the Fifth Circuit with our coalition with Mississippi and Texas, or nationally. Educate yourself, ask your senators, pay attention to who's being appointed at courts at the state and federal level, and speak up and ask that we do better.
You say you have a website?
We do.
Tell our audience what that is.
It's courtsmatter.org, and so we welcome all visitors.
Dr. Kenney, our time is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, folks, for watching our show. Come back again.